Where once we feared the dark, today we own it. Where once we were prey, we are now the apex predator of the earth. What a terror it would be to be reduced from predator to prey, to have the confidence of the apex shattered, to become nothing more than a frightened beast, hiding, skulking, and running to live for just one moment more. What horror would it be to be reminded that there always is a bigger fish? Predator was not just a great science fiction flick, it was also the culmination of the entire action genre. In the 80s, you had muscle-bound Supermen taking on entire armies and winning single-handedly. What worlds were there left to conquer, for no earthly opponent could stand against their might? Have them fight an alien? No, not a bloody xenomorph. That would be far too easy for the one known as the Austrian Death Machine. Aliens would have been a much different movie if the mighty Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped onto LV-426. He would chomp his mighty cigar and slaughter Xenos so handedly that even Robute Gilliman would be impressed. And then Arnold would make slow, sweet love to Ellen Ripley. And before you say, "You, old Arnie and old Sigourney," remember, while Arnie is old and leathery, Sigourney is still the paragon of beauty. At least so long as I take my glasses off. 70 becomes the new 20. Geriatric space adventurers aside, for the titans of action you had to have a great villain, and the Predator was one of the best of all time. There is a distinction between monster and villain. A monster kills because that's what it does. A villain kills because that's what he wants to do. The Predator is no mere movie monster, he is a bad guy. He has thoughts, feelings, and motivations beyond mere killing. His actor, Kevin Peter Hall, gave it his all to make the Predator more than latex and fishnets. He wanted the Predator to be a serious character and dramatic foil to Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Predator can be seen as the dark reflection of the action hero. How many times has Arnie ambushed and slaughtered a squad of men? How many times has Arnie been where the Predator is? The Predator works so well as a villain because under other circumstances, the good guy could be doing the exact same thing he is. The Predator was also just bloody cool. His armor, his weapons, and the very species design made him stand out from all the would-be alien villains. He, like RoboCop, had to be done just right. Paul Verhoeven mentions that in RoboCop, the design had to be just believable enough so that the audience wouldn't laugh at it. The Predator also had to be just right, otherwise he would fall into that all-encompassing B-movie trap. Everything about the Predator had to balance with itself. It had to be a threat, but not invincible. It had to be smart, but it couldn't read the bloody script ahead of time. It had to be cool, but not too human. In short, it, like the Xenomorph, had to be near perfect. Something like the Predator is not made. It is born. It is born from the mind of a talented master like Stan Winston. It is born of an amazing actor like Kevin Peter Hall. It, like a person, is born of happenstance and divine providence. So how do you follow up something like that? You could expand upon the Predator lore, have the Predator become a viewpoint character, or you could keep the Predator mysterious but raise the stakes. Before the release of Predator 2 in 1990, a comic series was commissioned by the almighty Dark Horse Comics. And the comic was called Predator Concrete Jungle. It followed the adventures of Dutch Schaefer, aka Arnie's character, brother John Schaefer. It ran from 1989 to 1990, and Predator 2 borrows a great deal from the plot, but simplifies it for a lower budget and swaps out Arnie's stunt double for Danny Glover, and in so doing makes the culmination of the buddy police genre. What happens after you stop Mr. Big selling crack to kids? Well, fight an alien. Makes me wonder if City Hunter tried selling ganja. But anyway, potheads aside, like with the other Alien and Predator and Alien vs. Predator comics, this comic would get turned into a prose novel, and this novel would be released in 1995. It was written by the Nathan Archer, a pen name for the Lawrence Watt Evans. He is a writer of science fiction and fantasy, and sadly, most of it is fairly obscure, which is a sin, as it is quite excellent. The only other book of his that I have read is The Misenchanted Sword, a comedic fantasy romp about, you guessed it, a misenchanted sword. With that in mind, that novel reached Alpha Prime status due to the great characterization and fun plotting, along with snappy and concise writing, all of which can be found within the Alpha Prime novel that is Predator Concrete Jungle. The novel is told from the third-person perspective and features two main protagonists and a few minor characters. The Predators do not have viewpoint characters and thus remain mysterious. The novel originally was supposed to take place in the near future of 1999, but after the release of Predator 2, it was scaled back to 1989. Hey, the year I was born. The novel takes place in New York City, the city of adventure version, that is. It is filled with numerous gangs of way higher power levels than in real life, and they have access to far more advanced weaponry than they do in real life. The gangs are running those evil drugs and routinely do battle in the streets. As this was the late 80s/early 90s, the novel features the most dastardly gang type of all, the punk. Truly, that Sid Vicious is the spawn of Satan. Our main protagonists are two NYPD detectives named Raish, a family man who is getting too old for this shit, but he still wants to help protect the people of NYC from crime, and Detective Schaefer, a detective, John Schaefer. Fun fact, this first name would not be revealed until 30 years after the fact in the comic Predator Hunters 3. He is Dirty Harry if Clint hit the roids like Arnie. The main hero of the novel is Dutch Schaefer, aka Arnie the Austrian Death Machine, Schwarzenegger's brother. This can either be lazy writing or an attempt at tying the novel to the first movie. To be honest, I'm not sure which one it is. It works in this novel and in this novel's sequel, but as of Predator Hunters 3, a comic that takes place 30 years later, John Schaefer still hasn't found Arnie. Guess he used that magic ticket. And that's not too far-fetched either. At one point in the novel, Raish mentions Schwarzenegger by fucking name. If the brother Schaefer hadn't gotten into the military, I guess he could do store openings or wait tables at Planet Hollywood, at least until they went out of business. Joking aside, John Schaefer is a fun Duke Nukem-ish protagonist that quips more like Dirty Harry and less like Schwarzenegger and acts more hardcore like Clint. I think it would have been way better to have had John Schaefer be another character entirely, as the brother angle never got a payoff even 30 years later, and this was due to the nature of the Predator sequels. You see, Arnie couldn't be found in any of these novels because Arnie was supposed to return as an arena fighter in Predator 3. That film never got made and was turned into Predators 2010, and in that film Arnie was supposed to show up in his own ship with his own Predator posse, and that scene never got filmed. So in short, don't tie major characters to actors that might not ever show up again. And if Predator 3 had been made, I guess Arnie's stunt double could have shown up or something. In any event, the novel starts with a hot opening. It is summer in NYC, and as a bunch of foul northerners, they have not discovered the joy and miracle of air conditioning, and thus the city is going mad due to the heat. Detective Raish and Schaefer are investigating a homicide. A disgruntled husband has given his wife both barrels for watching some show called Green Acres. He states that hearing fresh air, Times Square, sent him over the edge. Raish remarks that most murders are over something stupid and that most murderers are like this guy, which is true and is kind of funny considering the rest of the novel. Raish meets up with Schaefer later, and they ride around the city in their squad car, and Schaefer senses a disturbance in the force. Something is not quite right. Across town, there is a meeting going down between a mafia dude and a punk named Carr. Mafia dude wants to share drug territory and force out the Colombians, but little do they know they're being watched by a hunter. Some of the guns mentioned being used are very 90s and somewhat off. Carr is a big-time gang boss, so he packs the might of the Colt Python, but the mafia dude packs what is called a 38 auto. I get the feeling that the writer was trying to say 380 auto. 38 auto is a bit far-fetched because while they did exist, it is unlikely that some mafia dude would be carrying a turn-of-the-century Colt 1905. The Preds attack and slaughter most of the gang members in a scene that would later be retooled for Predator 2. Schaefer hears the gunfire and he and Raish speed to the battle. They arrive and Raish is the viewpoint character that sees the aftermath. The sheer horror of seeing flayed bodies really seriously unnerves the veteran police officer, and the writing really drives home how horrible the whole skinned alive thing would actually be to see. There was one survivor, the punk Carr. Carr and Schaefer butted heads back when Schaefer and Raish worked Narco, and Carr tries to kill Schaefer but fails. Schaefer, having the Schwarzen sense, senses a predator nearby and tries to shoot it with his 9mm automatic. Considering that Schaefer is a cop in the 90s, it is most likely a Glock or possibly a Beretta 92, but one can dream that he knows the glory of the Browning high power. Since Rache lacks the Swartzen sense, he gets spooked that Schaefer couldn't hit anything, and before we can have any pred action, a wild archetype appears. The novel is a bit of a send-up of the buddy cop genre. Rache and Schaefer are not buddies in the sense they hang out and eat chicken wings whilst watching Cheers, rather they are just work friends that would die to defend one another. And one other trope that is sent up is that of the annoying chief. In real life, detectives wouldn't interact directly with a chief of police, but instead a direct superior, and the obstructive chief character in this novel is a one Captain McComb. He is a dick, but since this is a novel and not a film, he is a dick with a point. And while he is not the most open-minded of people, he generally has a point with all his shouting and yelling, as Schaefer and Rache are the epitome of cowboy cops. Captain McComb shoos the detectives away before any more action can transpire. We then get introduced to General Phillips, the general from Predator 1. He has been tracking Predator activity and wonders when they will strike again. As you would expect, they do strike again, but in a villainous way. Predator 2 tones what happens next down by a wide margin. In Predator 2, Danny Glover's friends get sliced up by the Pred. The next Predator attack is a terrorist attack. A bunch of Preds smoke the space coke and attack an entire police shooting range and kill 6 cops. This is a very well detailed and creepy chapter, as the viewpoint character cannot really tell what is going on, but knows there's some bad shisa going down, and before he can intervene, he is knocked out by a predator. This terrorist attack puts these Preds squarely in the villain camp. It is a very evil act to take on law enforcement officers, men with families, men that are at least nominally on the side of good. The Predator was always meant to be a legit bad guy. Predator 2 kind of squiffed it by having him primarily kill drug-crazed psychopaths, and that made him look at least a little bit heroic, if not in neutral territory. At least most of the people he took down went looking for trouble. Here, though, the Predators just knock over a police shooting range and kill everyone. This is one of the darkest scenes in the novel, and reminds the reader that while the Predator might look cool, he is still a stone-cold bastard. Schaefer and Rache are suitably incensed by such a senseless and vicious attack. The novel then begins to theorize that the Predators are trying to antagonize Schaefer as sort of revenge for the death of Jungle Hunter at Dutch Schaefer's hands. And this all culminates at the first true Predator battle. Schaefer heads back to the first Predator massacre, and wouldn't you know it, he does, well, I would call it a battle, but that would be overselling it, because the battle that ensues reminds me of trying to take on Cazadors in New Vegas at level 1. The Predator ambushes Schaefer and then proceeds to beat the shit out of him, and then chuck him out a 5-story window. Rache breaks his fall with some, trash bags, and Schaefer lives to fight another day. But it turns out that Schaefer was able to snag a Predator mask. Not so good is the fact that Schaefer has been tagged by the Pred he was fighting. It's a literal high-tech tag jammed straight into his neck. Schaefer gets taken to a hospital, and it's learned that he cannot remove it as it's attached to a major artery. It is at this point that the novel switches gears, and it switches them very clunkily. As of this point, they know that the Preds are in Seinfeldville, but they're not really sure what to do about them. Schaefer then thinks that he can figure out what is going on by going to Central America? It's really bloody tenuous, and it just so happens that before Dutch's disappearance, that the brothers Schaefer got together and yacked a bit, and from that last yak session, John Schaefer is able to figure out where Dutch was in Predator 1. Sure, makes total sense. I gotta say that this is the weakest leap of logic in the entire bloody book, and it requires enough suspension of disbelief to hold up the Brooklyn Bloody Bridge. I get that the writer wanted to have a locale other than NYC, but by the Great Space Dragon, he should have tried to make it make more sense than, my Swartzen sense is tingling, and, the space hunted has to be in Central America, I guess. And so the dream team of Schaefer and Rache is split up, and the novel gives both characters pretty good coverage. Schaefer's plotline is straight rumble in the jungle action, and Rache is way more entertaining as it's cloak and dagger stuff with some great characterization. So the meat of the body of the novel is the rumble in the jungle with the Predator. Schaefer uses his Swartzen sense to go to a random piece of jungle where Arnie and the Predator fought. This time he has a little more than a simple 9mm automatic. He has an auto shotty. And since this is supposed to take place in 1989, this means that the only auto shotty that he would even consider using is the action movie classic, the Spaz 12, used in its semi-auto mode. At this time, there was no Saiga 12 and the AA-10 that was the fever dream of a madman. The battle with the Predator is exactly what one would want. It's a tough slog, and Schaefer barely survives it and only Enviro kills the Predator. Back in NYC, Raish is stressed out about Schaefer and eventually goes back to his precinct to catch up on paperwork. You know he got it bad. And his day is made even worse when he looks through the Predator mask. Yeah, that thing was hidden in plain sight in Schaefer and Raish's office. And when he looks through it, he sees the entire Predator hunting fleet hovering over NYC. The novel never gives us details about how much the Preds know of human society or if they can hack comms, but it's a good bet that they can do that since they are able to keep their mighty vessels from getting hit by planes or random bird strikes. Raish gets seriously fucked up by seeing an entire alien armada over his city, and he goes to Captain Obstructive for help, only to find that the feds are after him. The feds capture Raish, and this is made out to be a major breach of his civil rights. Ah, the good old days before the oh-so-wonderful Patriot Act. If this novel took place in 2009, he could be held without charge indefinitely. In any event, Raish escapes and hatches a plan to fight the foul Xenos polluting the skies of Holy Terra. He goes to his police station, and in a scene that would later be seen in Hot Fuzz, he gets a bunch of guns from the evidence locker in order to arm up to fight the Preds. Back in Central America, Schaefer gets kidnapped by some cartel members, but as you would expect, he escapes easily, and in a bit of annoying Deus Ex, he gets inadvertently saved by the Preds when they attack the cartel guards. Schaefer is finally rescued by General Phillips, but is told that he will be given to the Predators because Phillips believes that the Preds will seek retribution for the Predator that was killed. Raish gets the Swartzen sense and learns just where Schaefer will be left as an offering to the foul Xenos, and he gets there just in the nick of time. Raish and Schaefer meet up and plan what to do about ridding the soil of Terra of the unclean Xenos. Holy crap, what a novel. It does so much in so little time, all without feeling rushed. It has enough characters in order to be interesting and doesn't overdo it to the point where the reader gets bogged down. The novel's characters are what really gives this book the staying power to be Alpha Prime. Schaefer is the most boring as he's just Dirty Harry with roids, but Raish really gives the reader an insight into the mind of a normal man caught up in a space adventure. He knows that he is an out-of-shape, over-the-hill cop. He knows that no one really expects him to be an outer space adventurer. He knows he shouldn't put himself at risk due to his conflicting duty to his family, and yet he goes into battle against the foul Xenos in the name of Holy Terra, for only in death does duty end. The buddy cop nature of the team is fun and realistic. Schaefer is a right douche, but he is loyal to his friends and is a good example of lawful neutral. He's still a douche though to Raish, in that he expects Raish to be as crazy as he is when it comes to the law. Good for him that Raish actually is. The relationship can be summed up thusly. They don't hate each other, but they also probably call each other a bastard when they do something douchey, and then mentally say, fuck it, let's kick some ass. The villains for the novel are suitably entertaining and smart. You have the Predators, of course, and they don't lack for intelligence and fight like they are having fun, but you know that they can kill our heroes in an instant, and the heroes have to fight smart in order to survive. With that in mind, though, the Predators are not invincible and use stealth and deception to fight most of their battles. The novel features a human antagonist in the guise of General Phillips. He shows up all throughout the novel trying to keep the Predator under wraps so as not to antagonize the Xenos filth. He lacks the information to literally do anything. Remember, we are at 1989 levels of tech here. There's no anti-sat missiles, and supercomputers were less powerful than modern phones. He only becomes an antagonist because he wants to ensure that the Predators don't wipe out humanity in a fit of pique. He is not a villain, as he is not evil or really even opposed to our heroes, but is forced into an antagonist role due to being scared of the Predators. The novel introduces a few bits of lore here and there. For one, Arnold exists in that universe. The Predators know when one dies, even over interstellar distances. They are intelligent enough to understand and manipulate humans. Their biomasks are self-powered, and their ships can operate in atmosphere. What we don't see is anything about the Predator culture. We have a lot of contemplation about what and why they're doing things, but we never know for sure what the Predators are doing at any one time, and they're kept 100% mysterious. This does begin to introduce the concept of mutual respect. The mutual respect concept is something that would be seen more in Predator 2 when the Predator Elder gives Danny Glover the flintlock pistol. Here we have the Predators respecting opponents that put up a good fight. I have only a very few complaints about Predator Concrete Jungle, and the main complaint is the massive overuse of Schwarzensense, as it feels very unrealistic and could have been handled with snappier writing. The Central America thing is by far the worst of the Schwarzensense, as even the characters can't come up with a good enough reason to go other than feelings. It would have been much better to just keep the action in NYC and possibly have the hero sneak onto a Predator ship or something like that for information. And overall, the Central America side trip just feels like an excuse to visit a locale from the previous work. The next complaint is personal preference. Since the Predators are more active this time, it would have been nice to see a viewpoint Predator explain what is going on and see if the Predators actually had a real beef with John Schaefer or not. But I will say that I get why keeping it mysterious will have its appeal as well. But despite my complaints, this is still a novel that I have read for decades, and it is one that I highly recommend picking up. And so, I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good Predator Cold War, and good Predator Big Game, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you this great content. The ending is all sorts of epic, without dropping the Predator power level one bit. Schaefer and Raish hatch a plan to team up with the punk gang leader Carr and form an irregular army out of the local punks. There is an epic battle when Schaefer goes to recruit Carr, and Raish gets a kill, with an RPG-7 no less. His post-kill line is nothing short of amazing. "You're under arrest," fires rocket. Screw it. Boom! The army of Necromundan thugs is ready and willing to take on the Preds, and Schaefer gets the Preds' attention by firing a rocket at a random Pred ship. The rocket scratches the paint. That's right, the light of human excellence that is the RPG-7, a humble manpad, actually damages the Xenos Filth's shitty spacecraft of a Imperator. The fight is pretty rough as the foul Xenos outclass Schaefer's army, but humanity's will overcomes the greatest of odds. They get the idea to shoot fire hydrants to short out the Preds' cowardly stealth fields. Phillips shows up and lends aid after coming back to the light of the Imperator. The battle is hard fought, but when all seems lost, the God Emperor of mankind himself gives his children a miracle. He makes it rain, and thus the Preds run like the cowards they are from the God Emperor's beneficence. The end. Yeah, the Preds kick the crap out of Schaefer's army and leave just because it rains. Epic, bloody ending. The Preds were in no danger at all from the humans. Instead, they were having the time of their lives. And sure, some died, but that just makes it more fun. In short, they went to New York City brutality match and had a lot of fun on the two-way range. And then they left because, well, it was rainy and that's no fun anymore. And that goes to show the sheer power of the Predators. Humanity's glory could only stem the tide at great cost, while the Xenofilth wallowed in their own arrogance. They will pay the price when the Emperor's angels of death pay them a visit in the future. This is a novel that never gives its heroes an inch when it comes to fighting a villain like the Predator, and it never makes the Predator in any way human. The Predator remains inscrutable and remains a hunter, a villain that is not out to do evil, at least not evil in its own mind, but instead have a good old time killing shit. Schaefer does some Schwarzen psychology to figure this out, and thus gains a little respect from the Preds. They at least pull out the tracking device when they decide to leave the planet. One line that is rather ironic to the 2021 reader is that Phillips tells Schaefer, "Oh, you know where this is gonna go, that New York City will never be the same again." Ouch. The last half of the novel really makes the Predator-human conflict feel like the hopeless battle that it is. A foul Xeno that is the Predator is about 1/4 the power of a fucking Spec Marine, and the best humans have at this time in 1989 is a 12-gauge shotty and an M16A2. The final battle is hard, and is one of the few examples of a sequel not reducing the power level of a villain. In the end, Concrete Jungle is a well-written novel that, had it been called Space Hunted, would have still been kick-ass. Let's talk about the direct sequel to Concrete Jungle, Cold War. I have no idea when I can get to this book, so let's at least cover a bit of it right now. Concrete Jungle would be followed up by Cold War, a title that ties this to the past quite a bit, since Cold War refers to the battle against the Preds, and, well, the Soviet goddamn Union, which would thankfully collapse shortly after the comic's release. After Cold War, there would be a comic sequel that would have Schaefer in it, and then there would be absolutely nothing for 30 years until Predator Hunted 3. Cold War is a good enough sequel and Alpha Prime in its own right. The novel takes place in Siberia at a Russian oil pipeline during the heady days of the Soviet Union. On the cover, we can see a hottie, and that hottie just so happens to be a sexy Soviet infantry officer named Legachev, or however the hell you pronounce that. The novel shows that she faces sexism in the Red Army. Yes, it was so egalitarian. She is an infantry commander, so there is that, and she does have proper leadership skills. She and her squad investigate a crashed Pred ship, and almost all are killed, but she is able to escape. The Predators then raid the guard shack at the pipeline for parts. The Preds in this really show their strength, as they're able to crush a dude's head just by stepping on it. The novel wastes no time in getting Schaefer to Siberia. This is not bad, but I get the feeling that Legachev could actually have held the novel herself, but we gotta keep bringing Schaefer in because, well, he's our Arnie equivalent. He gets shanghaied by Phillips, who is sadly a generic evil general villain, and he forces Schaefer to go with a squad of reprobates to Siberia to acquire the Pred ship. This is a novel of the 80s/90s, and thus the military is super advanced, but also really dumb. The winterized M16s break in Siberia along with the high-tech heat suits, because they were only tested in Alaska. I get the feeling there was still some leftover FUD lore about the M16 being crap here. Schaefer and Legachev team up to fight the Preds, and there are some good fights, and Legachev is a pretty cool character in her own right, and is a good foil to Schaefer. She's a little more cynical than Raish, a little more harder edged than Raish, but still more human in many respects than Royd Clint. We also get some FUD gun lore, such as the AK-74 having Teflon bullets, and with these magical Teflon bullets, Schaefer is able to shred the Preds easily. Raish is not in this novel outside of a few cameos, which is most annoying indeed. I get that he was sidelined for the new Legachev character, but it would have been nice if he could have had a little bit more to do than just sicking the Russians on Phillips and his gang. The novel ends with the Preds escaping, only to have their ship blown up by some well-placed C4, and Schaefer remarks that Legachev would make a good member of the NYPD. This sets up a bit of romance between sexy Red Army babe and Royd Harry, but this never goes any bloody where. The novel also shows that Schaefer is going nuts due to the Preds, along with his years on the force and possibly something that happened during his military career. Oh, and Schaefer can speak Russian now, cause plot. There are some scenes where he is close to breaking down, and I think it's implied that he had a family that was killed Punisher style, as he mentions that the little white picket fence conceals lots of Prozac, and the Smith & Wesson in the nightstand gets a lot of use, which implies something seriously fucked up happened to make Schaefer Mr. Stoic. This novel is an excellent sequel to Concrete Jungle, and the Predator novel series had the potential to be much more than it was. Future Pred sequels should have carried on the Schaefer plot if they were going to keep shoehorning him into things, and at least carried it on until he finally found his bloody brother, dead or alive. And it could have also had him get together with Legachev and regain his humanity, similar in a way to what happened with Royce in Predators. Later novels could have also introduced Predator factions, and later had our heroes team up with Predators against an external threat. Alas, none of that would come to be, but at least we got something great nonetheless.